The SCP Foundation has interrupted your standard broadcast to issue a threat level Apollyon announcement.
SCP-001 exists in a timeline where the Foundation failed to contain an Apollyon-class entity, and as a consequence, humanity was eradicated. The Apollyon class was created specifically for SCPs with world-ending potential, named after the Greek name for Abaddon, a biblical entity, the Archangel of the Abyss, the Exterminator, the Destroyer. As such, very few SCPs ever received this designation. There had also been much discussion within the Foundation regarding which entity should receive the disturbingly prestigious title of SCP-001, but the few who survived the Daybreak agreed that this extinction entity was not only Apollyon class, but given the effect it had on planet Earth, had more than earned the title of 001. This video log is being recorded at Site-7, one of the few remaining Foundation bunkers sheltering survivors. We're creating it with the intention of educating those few of us still out there about SCP-001 and how to live as safely as is possible in this new world that we've been thrust into. All information in this log has been scrapped together from reports and findings logged from other sites, some of which remain active and some of which have since gone dark. Additional files and revisions to existing reports are being discovered as I record this, and so I have no idea how long this log will end up being, but it's not like any of us are pressed for time anymore, if there's even anyone out there to listen to this. Given that we're still finding new reports and revisions, the state of what remains of humanity may change throughout this log. For that, I'm afraid you've been warned. Within 24 hours of the emergence of SCP-001, the death toll was speculated to be in excess of 6.8 billion human beings. Based on research conducted by those few who survived the Daybreak, this entity that caused this appears to be the Sun. Site and system degradation in the years since emergence has led to some data being lost and or corrupted, but the remaining findings of several tests seem to indicate that the SCP-001 effect, which we will come to in a moment, is the result of exposure to light on the visual spectrum, regardless of whether this exposure is direct or indirect. All visible light between the wavelengths of 390 nanometers to 700 nanometers that comes from the Sun is to be avoided at all costs. This includes reflective sources of light as well, such as moonlight. Any exposure to this source of light, regardless of how big or small the point of exposure is, causes the victim to liquefy at the point of contact, with the effect spreading across the body until it is liquefied in its entirety. Visual reports of this effect liken it to melting wax. At no point throughout this liquefaction process, though, does the victim actually seem to die. The victim takes on a gelatinous consistency and will attempt to orient themselves in a fashion reminiscent of their previous form to varying levels of success. Human victims appear to retain a modicum of sapience and memory, so throughout the entire process, and also in the aftermath, they are very much conscious and sentient and, to some degree, still alive. In this new, horrific form, affected entities that come into contact with one another combine and blend at the molecular level. This does not appear to cause any pain or distress, but depending on the resulting form, can inhibit movement. In the years following the event, most of these 6.8 billion afflicted have morphed together into these gestalt forms, and it appears they have no maximum volume. They can combine and grow indefinitely. These combined entities simply resemble a blob of amorphous and chaotic biomass. The component organisms will alternate between a full to semi-liquid state, with limbs and body parts emerging periodically from the biomass before deteriorating and being absorbed by another life form within the collective. To move, the biomass will use its appendages to carry itself, and in larger forms, the entity will form a sort of pseudopod from their constituent life forms and drag itself across the ground, leaving a trail of smeared liquids and biomass. Fauna and flora affected by SCP-001 remain physically inert, but are still able to conduct photosynthesis and thus still provide oxygen, and remain sentient also, displaying behavior identical to that of their normal selves when not absorbed by the biomass. Due to the immense heat now given off by the sun's rays, however, much of the surface is entirely uninhabitable, and oceans have almost entirely dried up. Any organism capable of flight has lost the ability to do so, likely to ensure that these creatures are within range of the biomass for consumption. The Foundation failed to contain SCP-001 because of its nature. You can't contain the sun or the light that it produces. Whatever happened to it, or whatever entity neutralized it, has succeeded. They've won. Humanity must now embrace the darkness and fear the light. If we as a species wish to continue to coexist in secrecy with this neutralized sun, the Foundation implores you to remain in contact with any other survivors located within secure facilities, and, as per these logs, to attempt to reach Site-19 by any means possible. Site-19 is currently being established as a safe haven for survivors, and those running it need all the hands they can get to help keep it running. Site-5 was to be the original safe haven, but based on a number of unconfirmed reports, it appears compromised. By the sounds of it, Site-19 is one of our final hopes. Those stationed at Site-19 are ordered to pursue research concerning off-world colonization. Our only hope as a species is to abandon our home and attempt to start again in a dark corner of the galaxy, one where the light cannot reach. All shuttles produced must not in any circumstance allow light to penetrate the interior. Any personnel or individual with knowledge regarding the whereabouts of the O5 Council, the founders and overseers of the Foundation, are to relay this information to an administrator. The existence and identity of these individuals is no longer classified. Yes, they exist, the conspiracy theories were right, and they need to be found ASAP if evacuation of planet Earth is to ever be achieved. Considering travel, then travel by air is the safest option. Any individual attempting to travel outdoors must fully cover their bodies in several layers of protective clothing to prevent the light from striking their skin, and wherever possible, travel by foot should be avoided. Cities and man-made structures in general provide the greatest protection from the light, provided, of course, that windows are avoided and or blocked. Formerly wooded areas, however, should be circumvented. Any victim exposed to the light, or, I guess, SCP-001, as we should now refer to it as, are to be considered lost and should be abandoned, regardless of who they are. Do not, under any circumstance, attempt euthanization. Death has been compromised and is no longer the end. It will only inflict more pain on the victim. We will elaborate more on that in a moment. If any SCP-001 collective forms are encountered, referred to from here on out as SCP-001-A, they should be avoided at all costs. However, in the unfortunate event that you are spotted, electrical weapons have proven effective at immobilizing them in self-defense. Incendiary weapons seem to inflict partial damage to them, and cryonic munitions appear to be the most effective as of now. Given the effect that SCP-001 has had on the ecosystems of the world, food is likely to become very scarce. Preliminary tests have, however, proven that SCP-001-A biomass is relatively safe to consume, but only as a last resort. Because it may need to be reconstituted within the digestive system, only small volumes should be consumed to prevent internal blockages. It is, of course, advised that one should not consume the biomass given its nature, but for many, there may not be an alternative.